Okay, today I just want to talk a little bit about alternative platforms. This discussion was prompted by the hearings into quote unquote white nationalism and Islamophobia that occurred the other day in Congress. And as I said in my previous video, there the irony of this is that there is so little white nationalism and Islamophobia occurring that they had to invite the father of a woman who was killed allegedly because of a parking dispute. She was murdered by a mentally damaged atheist who hated all religions, and she happened to have the misfortune of being in the same building with someone who had harassed and targeted other tenants who weren't Muslim, and being there the day that he went on a shooting rampage and killed three Muslim tenants of this building. But he was an atheist. He was not a white nationalist or an Islamophobe, and didn't hate Islam any more than he hated other uh, other forms of organized religion. So this was their star witness, the proof that white nationalism kills and Islamophobia kills, even though the perpetrator of that crime was not a white nationalist and was not an Islamophobe, insofar as anyone who hates all religions is an Islamophobe. And one of the ironies of this hearing was that the man um, asked to testify by the Democrats was, I believe his name is Mohammed Sawa. I could be mispronouncing that name, but he has an identical name, and I'm not making this up. You can Google this after the video. He has an almost identical name to a Palestinian American, uh, a teenager or young adult who was the son of a Palestinian immigrant who was a suicide bomber and targeted American forces in Iraq. He was 18 or 19 years old, and he uh, killed himself and killed others in a suicide bombing in Iraq. So Islamophobia is so prevalent that they have to invite someone whose daughter was not a victim of Islamophobia and whose daughter's death had nothing to do with Islamophobia, and who shares the name with one of hundreds, and there are hundreds of Muslims that kill themselves every year trying to murder non-Muslims, and is simply one of thousands of Muslims who've killed themselves over the past several decades since 9/11, trying to murder non-Muslims. I'm sure the irony was lost on the Democrats in the committee, but I noticed it, and hopefully more of you now are aware of that. But uh, the main thrust of this video is just in um, analysis of what can be done now that the Democrats, now that corporate media and the press, especially, although thankfully the mainstream press is dying, newspapers are closing every day, they're losing money hand over fist, which is a good thing. What can be done as an alternative? I mean, you have Julian Assange. Now, talk about this in another video. Julian Assange is essentially been being kidnapped and brought to the United States because he published information that was embarrassing to Democrats, embarrassing to Obama. You have just compare what's happening to Obama's friend, i.e., Jussie Smollett, who committed an actual crime, with what's happening to Obama and Hillary Clinton's enemy, Julian Assange and draw your own conclusions from that. But you have Julian Assange being targeted, and I think this is what's going to happen. People who have any information that's incriminating to the powers that be, that's embarrassing to progressives, that's embarrassing to Islam, which already embarrasses itself on a daily basis. These people will be prosecuted. The UK is already going the route of the Red China. The UK, Australia, and New Zealand are doing their best to eradicate freedom of speech, and it's only a matter of time before this really gets going in the US. And the Democrats do not have power; they don't have control over the FCC, so their attacks are limited to these show trials and these farcical hearings. But once they get power, you have a vision of what they're going to do by looking at New Zealand and looking at the antipodes. But what can we do? One of the suggestions was to find alternative platforms. For example, DLive. Now, DLive has gotten a lot of attention lately because they managed to snag PewDiePie. And this David Wood mentioned this in his live stream chat with the Apostate Prophet the other day. The fact that any sort of competition to these tech monoliths monopolies, excuse me, is going to be good. And I agree. As far as it goes, competition, people challenging YouTube and Facebook and Twitter competing is good. Even if, like Gab, they're going to be the targets. If they actually do provide a platform for genuine debate and argument and dissenting viewpoints, they're going to be targeted. They're going to be deplatformed themselves and stripped of their funding mechanism. Payment processes are going to be attacked. But any sort of competition is good. But I would raise a note of skepticism on this particular platform, DLive. Now, they may not be. I don't know the backstory behind the people who created this. They might not have malicious intent. They might not be progressives or interested in advancing their own leftist dogma. They might just be capitalists trying to provide an alternative platform. But I listened to an outline of the terms of service by presumably the man who operates DLive yesterday. He live streamed to millions of people and explained how to become a member of DLive, and I created an account just to participate in that. How to become a member of DLive, how to upload, how to share, how to capitalize on your account. And it was very interesting because the way he described it, it sounded almost not only just like YouTube, but in some respects worse than YouTube, especially when he got to the nitty-gritty and described what their restrictions are vis-a-vis hate speech. Now, I think a lot of you, like me, understand that hate speech is a made-up term. It's a term just like Islamophobia used to suppress dissenting views and to encroach upon and restrict free speech. There's no hate speech clause in the First Amendment's right to freedom of speech or freedom of the press. There's no part of American law criminalizing hate speech. Now, there are hate crimes, which also is a kind of misleading term and a slippery slope. But there's no hate speech. But all providers, all content um, all providers for content makers have some sort of hate speech disclaimer, which prevents you from posting certain things. And the way he described the hate speech restrictions, it sounded almost like it almost sounded worse, to be honest, than the restrictions on YouTube, particularly when he focused on religion. Now, he asserted that you may not post anything that's hate speech regarding national origin or the usual disclaimer: national origin, race, and religion. And he explained this. The way he explained it, it sounded almost as if, and I'm not sure if he understood it that way, but almost as if you can't post any critique or post or video upload any video that impugns Muhammad or the tenets of Islam. Because if you can't criticize religion, then that's basically it's not only a restriction on what you can say about Islam, but virtually any criticism of Islam is verboten, including spreading the gospel, which denounces false religions and false gospels. And Islam is the biggest false religion on the planet currently, and it's the biggest false gospel. So it made it sound as if you can't criticize Islam, and that's a very tough situation if that's going to be how they market themselves. And if you can't, it's going to make a lot of my videos irrelevant. Nah, I'm not going to be able to post my videos there if that's. And certainly David Wood is not going to be able to upload even his most benign videos if that's the case. Now, maybe that's just standard boilerplate, but you have to be concerned, especially after they banned the Alex Jones channel immediately after it came to their notice because of media and left-wing watchdog groups hounded them, and within a couple of days they banned them. So in other words, they knuckled under to these malicious bad actors within a couple of days because of fear of bad press. Now, you may say, well, that's just Alex Jones. That's a unique example because he's being sued. He has a lawsuit that judges have allowed to go forward regarding his Sandy Hook claims, which he's recanted. But that just they might be afraid of lawsuits. You know how skittish companies are regarding lawsuits. And okay, maybe that's true, but what does that say if they're that responsive to the same groups that will be demanding that David Wood be deplatformed, and Pamela Geller if she creates a DLive account, or Robert Spencer, or Bill Warner of Political Islam? Almost all of them, any of them, would be subject to the same attacks that Alex Jones. I mean, Alex Jones is a key figure because of his not even so much his conspiracy theories. These are just used as a pretext to attack him because he helped Donald Trump and he reaches a mass audience. So the same thing could be used against people who aren't conspiracy theorists. Like I said, Pamela Geller or Robert Spencer or Bill Warner, David Wood, the apostate prophet, anyone who's critical of Islam or critical of mass immigration, they could be targeted. And the DLive will use the same justification. It shows a lack of principle that they're knuckling under, even if it's in fear of lawsuits. And there's no indication that that's the reason they truckled to these people. There's no indication. So, in summary, just for the people keen on DLive, yes, I mean, for huge mega creators like PewDiePie, am sure it's a valuable platform, simply because YouTube will not be stealing half of your money. They're not confiscating most of your super chats. They're not just siphoning off all of the money from your creation. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, good for PewDiePie. He's taking advantage of this. But in terms of creating a free and open environment where you can criticize sacred cows, and there's no bigger sacred cow now than Islam, and you can express dissenting thoughts on immigration and foreign policy. I am not that confident, just based on the very short, very brief description that the DLive, the guy in charge of DLive, gave the other day. So we'll be looking for other means. You just have to understand that just because this is an alternative to the major platforms, that doesn't mean the people behind it are interested in free speech. They might be just as, just like these other internet platforms are alternatives to legacy media. That doesn't mean that the people in charge of them don't have the same brainworms that infect people from legacy media. They may be progressives. They may be have the same dimmy attitude. They might they probably grew up in the same public education system, so it's hard to reconcile that with the type of ideas that we're interested in.